Hi, I'm Gwyneth Shotwell, Mike's wife, and the co-owner of this beautiful car. And I think my role in this partnership is has a lot to do with enjoying the beauty of the car. And actually, my background with cars probably starts when I was growing up and had two older brothers who both loved working on old cars, kind of like Mike described, getting his Model A and taking the engine out and seeing how it worked. And I really enjoyed cars and couldn't wait to get my driver's license. And I was lucky enough that my first car that I owned was a stick shift. And I had to learn how to drive a stick shift before I got that car, and learned in an old Ranchero with my stepfather and stalled a lot of times. But boy, once I learned how to drive it, I just loved driving a stick shift and loved that first car. And so when we got into the Model A hobby, which I didn't realize at first that it really is a world of couples. A lot of people think that the car world is just for guys, but it really is not. So we got involved with our local club in the Peachtree City area, and it's just been a wonderful part of our life. And a lot of the women do drive the cars, and I love driving this car. As Mike mentioned, it has a synchronous transmission, which really does help in the driving of the car. Just when you need to slow down and go around a corner, you don't have to bring it to a complete stop to double clutch it and get it into first. It makes a huge difference, just that one little aspect of it, and one thing that makes it so nice to drive. And so when we first bought this car and we started working on it, it was very interesting to see all the things that went into really just kind of sprucing it up and making it ours, and making it, I really think of it as a piece of jewelry. I just really enjoy it. And when we first got it, the color combination, the subtlety of the combination of the colors, we wanted to name our Henry's Lady, and I suggested the name of Grace. My grandmother, Grace Jones, was an elegant lady, and we also were thinking of Grace Kelly, and what an elegant platinum blonde with her pearls, champagne-colored dresses, and we said, all right, this is Gracie. This is going to be our Gracie. So whenever we go out in the garage, I look across the garage and see this car, and it is a beautiful piece of jewelry. That's really how I think of it. And one of the things that I like too is, Mike mentioned, we've got a stone guard on here, which is the original stone guard from the car. It's heavier than the reproductions today. It was in fairly bad repair, just age, and so we had that replated, and so it gives a nice shiny look on it. We found a wonderful 1931 pair of license plates. Just some of those little details are the kinds of things that I really enjoy about the car, and it's just a real joy to drive. Another fun feature related to this car is that Mike and I ended up writing a story, a history of the car that we were lucky enough to get published in the Restorer magazine, the national magazine for MAVCA. And Mike has always been a collector, really enjoys the history, researching the history of when he first started out, Civil War artifacts, and we've always really enjoyed that aspect of collecting. And so, of course, when we found out that it had this Russian engine, let me back up one step and say that the way we found out it had the Russian engine was that we had it up at Bentley's Antique Auto. He and his guys were doing all the wonderful work on this car. And he called Mike one day after they'd taken the engine out, and he says, Mike, I don't know what's going on here. There's Russian lettering on the side of this engine. Well, that started us off, and started doing research on the car, and that's how we found out more about the history, and particularly about the Russian engine, which was so fascinating. So we decided that that would be a story that other Model A people might enjoy knowing about. So we've done a lot of writing together over the years in our business, and also extracurricular writing of stories and whatnot. So we had a great time putting together the story of this car, all aspects of our having purchased it. We got to meet the folks that we bought it from on a subsequent trip to California. I had lunch with them one day, and it just added another aspect of enjoyment to the car. And So we were able to tell the whole sequence of finding out about the engine, finding out more about the plant in Russia, and then going on to what we had done to the car, all the way to the last polishing, spit and polish that we had done up in Roswell by a wonderful detailer up there to get this car the way it is. Following the publication of that article, we were fortunate enough to get an annual award from MOFCA for that article. And after that, they had the national MOFCA meet was in Marquette, Michigan, and we were able to show that car there. They were very excited to have the car featured at the final banquet. And so in the great hall on the lake there, we had the car there sitting up next to the podium, and on the other side was the 20 millionth car. And it was a very special evening because Edsel Ford II, the great-grandson of Henry Ford, was our special guest. And so it was really fun to have him come and talk about his enjoyment of seeing all the Model A's he'd encountered, and to see what a world of people there are out there who love the cars, want to promote the cars, want to preserve the cars, and then that he really appreciated our beautiful A400. So it was a pretty special night, and all of that coming out of this interesting engine. It's a pretty interesting story. Now Mike was talking about the history of Ford helping to create a plant in Russia. And one of the aspects was that Russia had a lot of gold, and they were mining a lot of gold. And so at that time, when the plant, the equipment was going over, they were able to pay Henry Ford in gold. And so it was a very interesting, paradoxical situation, relationship between this communist government and very capitalist Henry Ford. But it actually ended up being sort of a mutually positive relationship. He made sure, as we said, that there was a non-competition. They were actually making Phaetons and other Model A's, but they were not allowed to export them to other countries. So when the crates came over in this shipping container from Czechoslovakia with the Russian equipment, it was through Czechoslovakia, so technically it was not being exported from Russia to the United States, and that's how they got around it, and that's how Ford Obsolete and the fellow who restored our car was able to take advantage of this very interesting engine.
Well, that is really interesting about Henry Ford. He was doing business overseas when other people wasn't back in those days, wouldn't you say?
Well, that's true, and he found a really interesting solution to the problem of being able to transition over for manufacturing the 32s and beyond, and found this market in Russia, which was pretty unusual. He did have factories around the world, but he also was known for being able to, have forests where he could his lumber and being able to control and manufacture sort of all the parts that he needed.
Oh, yeah.
So he was used to looking outside the United States, and this was a pretty unique opportunity that he saw.
Well, and he took advantage of it, and it worked out real well for him. He was a real shrewd businessman, no question about it. Mm-hmm. And so if it was an opportunity there, he would take advantage of it.
Yes, and he certainly did.
Some of them came with transmissions, some of them came with short blocks, some of them were complete engines and complete transmissions. And obviously, Dave Treichel, the man who restored this car, who owned this car, didn't use one of their transmissions because he wanted to put in a synchromesh, and that was a 1939 Ford synchromesh transmission that he put in the car. So we got an engine. And as to how complete it was, I'm not exactly positive, because we pulled the engine apart and looked at it when we re-restored the car, and took a look in there. That's where we found the Russian lettering on the timing gears,
right.
and we studied the one on the block I had to do a lot of research on the lettering on the side of the block for Molotov and so forth. But it's all quite interesting history, very, very interesting history. And in this, everything about this car is historical.
It is, and you know that's almost a miracle that would happen in that way to make it so you could enjoy it today. But anyway, a lot of these old car stories come from rare finds and stuff that you know, it's just kind of unique situations in a lot of cases, and it's great that those things happen so we can enjoy them and see the cars today. And you seem to know an awful lot about it, and we appreciate it.
Well, let me tell you another interesting story. As when I was the president of the A400 group, there was some research that I had done early on, and that somebody else had done, and then I kind of dug it up and took a look at it. There was a man that had bought, a farmer. He bought about 25 Model A's, and one of them was an A400. And he put them in a gully sideways to catch the silt, so that he wanted to farm the land. And so he thought naturally it would fill up with silt and he wouldn't have to move all the dirt in and so forth. So he bought all these cars. He got them for probably a couple of dollars a piece, or who knows what he got them for. Probably free for hauling them away. And he put this A400 in. Well, when this young man came a number of years later, he saw, he looked down, he said, my goodness, there's an A400 down there in this gully, because the silt never filled it in. Well, what happened, one of the guys wanted one of the other cars, and he took the A400, and they dragged these things. The farmer gave them to him for $10 or $5 or something, and because it didn't work, the silt didn't work. So he dragged them. They got the chains and everything, and a winch, and they pulled him out of the gully up on the side of this hill, and it was only a half a car. The whole half the car had rotted out. So he got home. He didn't know what to do with it. They dragged it onto a truck and dragged it home. And by God, he started advertising for it, and he found another car that had been wrecked on the other side on the East Coast. And so these people bought this other half of the car, and they married these two A400s into one, and they even had the plates on the inside, the two of them. And we've done our darndest to try to find that car. We can't find it, but it's well documented. It's done. So you have even strange incidents like that, with the restoration world. And,
well, that's an interesting story, Mike. But listen, why don't you show us this old motor and stuff that you've been talking about, so we can show the people this motor that come from Russia. And if you don't mind, raise the hood and tell us about it.
All right. We're looking here at the. Before we open the hood up, we should probably talk about the this three-door hood on it. This is an original three-door hood. It was an aftermarket purchase for it, but it was an upgrade. It gave the car an upgraded kind of a look, and that's what they were aiming for with these A400s. Not everyone put these on, but this is the kind of thing that was incorporated in this car to make it look more expensive at the time. Also, while we're going in, you can see the difficulties that the side mounts make for getting in and working on the engine. Because you have these big side mounts. Most of the Model A's only had, if they had a side mount, it was on only one side when they came out of the factory. But you could purchase this after at the dealership, and they could put a second matching side mount. This, of course, in 1972, when Mr. Entress'ink remodeled the car, he did not have the chrome bands on it. We spiffed it up a little bit with that, or the former owner did, I should say. And these wonderful mirrors that are strapped in with these leather straps over, they're absolutely useless, incidentally. When you drive down the road, they bounce around and you can't see, but they sure look good. And that's what you're after with this kind of a car. The mirrors, seeing out of these cars, there are some difficulties with it. It's not like a modern car, looking at a great big window in the back and so forth. But, and they're flashy. When you stand on the side and look at the profile of the car, these side mounts make them look very flashy. But let me go ahead and pull the hood here, and we'll talk a little bit about, I think what I'll do is just lay this back. I might go back and talk a little bit about how much this car has been driven since the 70s. And we believe that this car, when we purchased it, from the beginning of the car to today, it was driven 56,000 miles. And so when Mr. Treshelle got it, when he restored he kept the speedometer the same, we believe. We're quite certain of that. Maybe not 100%, but quite certain that we're on target with that. When we took this engine apart, it has very little wear inside it. And it's probably only been driven about maybe maybe at the maximum 5,000 miles since 1972. Mr. Treshelle didn't drive it very much. He passed away in the 80s, and we don't drive. We show this car a lot, and we don't drive it out a lot. We'll take it on day tours and things, but not overnight for long, grueling tours and so forth. But the engine looks like it did when it was brand new. This is actually the heater that comes off the manifold, and Mr. Taylor could come down and describe every aspect of this engine far better than me. But it's clean and beautiful and looks like it came out of the factory. These are the kinds of spark plugs that were used, the distributor, the manifold, the carburetor is down here, and it also has oil pans down at the bottom to catch any dripping oil. All Model A's drip oil, incidentally. It's not something the matter with them. That's just what they do. This is the head down here, the head for the four-cylinder engine, and this was a distributor. But everything has been restored. The firewall is painted and extremely clean. We had all of this work done. We had the entire front clip pulled off when we re-restored the car, and had everything basically from the windshield out revamped and redone.